Thanks for coming back. Today we are going to be trying something a little bit different within the pen and wash realm still, but we're going to try some sort of like a night sky galaxy. And so I've kind of mapped out my little drawing of a house down here, just so I could get proportions correct with the middle of the page and stuff like that. But it's a very loose pencil drawing. Once again, I'm using the Pentalic illustration pens. You can really use any illustration pen that's got some nice black ink though, if you want. But we're just going to start by outlining our house and we'll take it from there. It's being pretty loose with my lines and stuff like that. Doesn't have to be perfect. Feel free to copy my work, or you can do your own based on a reference, whatever you want. It's up to you. You know, it's totally okay as you're learning to use other people's work to reference, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe that's like not something that's okay, but I feel like it is. Like if you're still learning and stuff, might as well. It's the easiest way to learn proportions and how to properly learn perspective and stuff like that is using references. So if you're always trying to freehand and sew against references, I think it just makes it harder. So as long as you're not selling it, I think you're okay. As long as it's not for profit. And this is going to be a pretty simple little outline here. We're going to do the window. So my favorite thing about pen and wash is it can just be just loose and fun. Doesn't have to be exact. It's not going for realism or anything like that. It's just going for stylistic, which is always a good time. I'm gonna come through with some lines to kind of define that shadow on the rooftop. It's looking good. Maybe we'll add in like a little windowsill right here. Add some more diagonal lines. Pretty sparing with those. You know, we're not trying to fill it in too much, but I think we'll have some light coming in from the back of this basically. And then we'll have a little light on in the window itself. That's looking good. I actually really like that. So this is kind of an exercise in a graduated wash. I never know if it's gradiated or graduated. I've heard it's graduated. I always thought it was like a gradient, but a graduated wash is what we'll go with. If I'm wrong, correct me, but I don't care. Cool, that's gonna look good. Okay, so that's starting. Now we're gonna take our brush, and this is our trusty slanted brush, just like that. And we're gonna load up our paper with water. Actually, we're gonna do our first wash on the paper. And so we're just gonna get a nice, even wetness across the page. And this is going to be the basis for our graduated wash. And I think this is going to be from a sunset up to a kind of a galaxy. Make sure that pen's dry before we go over it, because that'll definitely smudge. It's not all the way dry, but that's okay. We'll go with it. I'm just going to go around it like that. Yeah, that's looking good. You want to still work while this general wash is still damp. And you don't want to get it to where there's puddles on your paper. You want it to be just damp that will hold the color and help it blend together. Puddles are bad. No puddles here. Cool. I think that's looking good. Just going back over and making sure we got everything. And we're going to start from dark to light. So I imagine basically black up here, kind of like a deep purple maybe, so maybe a little bit of blue mixed with black, mixed with some red. Wash off our brush so we don't mix those colors too heavily. And a little bit more blue. And I just mixed the colors because I wasn't thinking, but that's okay. Okay, now we're going to come up and just start going. All of our brush strokes will be the same direction. So I'm not going back and forth, I'm just going one way. Like that, we can come back over with darker colors and build up those tones. But if I were to go back and forth, you'd get this weird, like, see how it's kind of pulling the paint with it? So that's why one continuous big brush stroke is key. Yeah, that's looking good. We're just going to let the paint slowly work off of our brush, and it'll fan itself out over time. So see how it's starting to do that? And we can use a little bit more water too on our brush just to start pulling that color down and letting it gradually fade itself. Cool. Now we're going to start moving into more of the reds down here. So I'm going to grab a red, make sure that's what I want. Grab quite a bit of water on our brush, and we're just going to work it in from there. You don't want it to be like streaks of color. You want it to just seamlessly merge together, and you're still working while this whole paper is wet. And that's kind of crucial with this. So working from red, and then we're going to go down to more of a yellow. And you definitely don't want pools of water. You know, if you're getting pools of water, you're doing it wrong. So, something to be aware of. Ooh, the dangers of mixing color, got a few little drips, is that it'll murk them, make them kind of muddy, murky. So, something to be aware of. Now we're going to take our yellow and kind of work it into that red as well, or pink, I guess, is more of what it is. We're just going to work that around our house, try not to go into our house too much. I know generally I'm pretty sloppy with that, but for this one I think it'll look nice to be a little bit more diligent with our control of our color. Trying to avoid puddles. Oh, see, that was a little too much. So if you get too much paint on the paper, come back with some water and work it in. Try to pull it out a little bit and just keep going the same direction. Keep all of your strokes consistent. That's the key here. Consistent. That looks awesome, actually. That's the first try. I didn't even have to restart the video. It's a miracle. We're gonna come back through with some more of our red and kind of darken up these colors that we've got while it's still wet. Keep in mind, the more water you add, the more your paper will tend to buckle. But to do a wash, a graduated wash like this, you have to have water. So it's kind of a give and take. And we're going to add some blues up here, kind of bridge that gap into the purples. And yeah, you're trying to make those transitions as seamless as possible. And then we're going to take some red with our blue to make some purple. Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. Try not to have too much water on there because your paper is wet. Man, that is probably one of the better graduated washes I've done. They can take some practice, but once you get used to them, they are just an incredible tool. We're going to keep building up our tones. And that's using more paint, less water on your brush to really get those deep, deep, deep dark tones. Cleaning your brush in between can help clean off some of that muddled, mixing of colors. Bring in some of that beautiful red. And just washing off the color from our brush and coming back over and just letting that wet paper do its work. And you're just guiding the paint. Add a little bit more water to our brush. Once again, try not to puddle. But once this dries, it's going to create just a gorgeous, gorgeous color. And then I think we're going to take some black with some blue and really add it in up here to darken that purple. I didn't add just pure black, I added a little bit of blue in there. Wow. Yeah, that's gorgeous. Super cool. Clear off your brush. With each new line that you do, you do not want to mix colors on this. And take some more of that yellow, get some more water on our brush, come back through. Ooh. Yep, I'm just working it up into the red. It's okay to have a little bit of pink down there, I guess. And then it slowly gets lighter and lighter and lighter as you approach your bottom of your page. Wow. Probably one of my favorite tutorials so far. It's good to mix it up, you know, from the traditional pen and wash. Take some more blue in. You will lose some of your saturation on your colors as this dries. So it is okay to go a little darker than you think. Rinsing off that brush. And see how that just fades that line perfectly. We're going to come back through with our red. So our red right now is our weakest color, and we kind of want a little bit more. I didn't clean my brush, so I got a little bit of yellow up there, which is okay. We can come back with our blue. And I'm using Koi watercolors, which can be extremely, extremely vibrant. So something to be aware of. You can use Winsor Newtons, those are always good. You don't want to have so much paint on, or so much water on your paper like I had. It's starting to get a little cauliflower going on, which is where the color starts to kind of bleed out in this weird pattern that looks, you can use it for stylistic stuff, but I tend to try to avoid it, you know. We're gonna take some more black and just come up here and really darken that, leaving quite a bit of color on the brush with less water. And that just gives it that beautiful contrast fading in. Cool, and we're gonna call that good for now. Now we're gonna take a break and dry that. So we'll start the video up in a second. Perfect. Okay, now we're gonna do our window while we're thinking about it. Come through with some yellow. And we're just gonna use a little bit of water on our brush, but a lot of color just for that ultra saturation. Leaving some little separators in there. The little window separator thing. Forgot what they're called. And we're just gonna build that up. We can come back through and add some lines in on that. I think will look really good. Now we're gonna add some shadow on the roof. Come through with some purple, I think, so it matches. And then the light is coming from this side, so we're gonna have this roof cast a shadow onto this side of the house, keeping our strokes consistent. You can define a line down it, but just keeping that consistent. Looks really nice. Yeah, it's looking really good. We're gonna bring that up a little bit. Super cool. And then that light's gonna be hitting on this side too, so it will cast a little bit of a shadow right here and onto this side of the chimney. And onto that side of the house. The shadow will probably be darker up underneath. I'm working a wet on wet technique, so the paper is still very wet, and I'm putting more and more color in, and that'll help bleed it together, blend it together. That's going to cast a little shadow down, I think, too. Cool, and then there will be a little shadow under this lip, like that. I actually kind of really like that simplistic look. We're going to take a smaller brush, which looks like this, still a flat tip. We're going to come through and do some bricks on that chimney with some brown. And maybe do our roof brown too. And maybe some of those windowsills, but we're gonna let those things dry before we do that, or else it'll bleed together and look real funky. So we're gonna force dry it with our hair dryer. Cool, and I think we still need to put a little bit of shadow underneath that, or a little bit more color into that house, I think, rather, I was going to say. So let's take a very light wash and just bring it through, and this is of kind of like a gray, just to add some texture into that. Take your brush strokes, go the same way, going that way, kind of adding in some shingles, so working left to right. And I'm using the very, very tip of this brush. It's pretty sharp. And just so you guys know, I don't use very expensive brushes or anything. They're pretty affordable. Just so if you're feeling like you need to buy the best brush in the world, just know that you probably don't. You can get away with cheaper stuff and then step up later, you know, when you can actually afford it and understand what you're buying. And yeah, this is thankfully a craft that you do not need to spend a whole ton of money on right out of the gate. Okay, we're gonna come through and define some of this stuff again, but we're gonna dry it first. Lots of drying. And that's looking good. Now we're gonna take this big brush. These guys, it's a brush pen, but they can put a lot of color down. So you have to be very, very careful that you don't put a lot of pressure down, because they will get really thick lines, you know. But they are awesome once you learn how to use them. I'm just using the very, very tip of it, just to define a little bit. I'm not doing straight, big, bulky lines, trying not to anyway. But you want to be very careful. And if you're not familiar with these brushes, I would recommend to practice with them before you go and do a big project with them, because they can be pretty difficult. They're kind of cool if you use them. That's what I've noticed about arches, is that it doesn't work as well with pens, just because it's so fine-toothed that it kind of picks up pen a little weird. So you have to just learn to work with it. Yeah, that one is too small. So you have to find a nice workflow. Cool, that's looking good. It's looking kind of like a children's book illustration almost in a way. We're going to define those lines really quick. And probably come through and add some color to those windows. Just, I know my pen isn't dry, but that's okay. It's a pretty small area. Yeah, it's looking good. Now we're gonna add in some little clouds. See how this works. I'm just gonna take my normal brush, that guy, and we're gonna get some, probably just a little tiny bit of red. And we're just gonna come through and very lightly in the background add some kind of like swishy clouds, but keeping your brush strokes going the same way. And you want these to be pretty minimal. I'm not making mine too big. It's nice to kind of start with a little line and then build your way up. So I'm kind of making like almost little UFO shapes, right? And these are really light. Let's see how I just build that up and keep them all going the same way. And you don't want uniform. Nothing in this world is uniform unless you're doing a stylized version of something. But anything in nature is, if anything, it's not uniform at all. Just using the edge of that brush, you know. Maybe come back through and define some of that color a little bit since they're still wet. That's so cool. I'm really pleased with this. This is fun. So I found my gel pen. This is just a white pen that's a fine point pen that does some white gel, and it's great for white details and stuff like that. So we're gonna add some sheen into this window. It works better on dark colors, but for now, I think that's okay. Okay, and we're gonna come through and just work in some stars. Just little dots, make them different sizes, bigger, smaller. Random, completely random sizes, placement. It's like back when you were in grade school, you know. Don't want big clumps, you don't want uniform clumps. General rule of thumb is uniform is bad, random is good. As I proceed to make a uniform cluster. And I recommend getting one of these pens. They're just super awesome. Yeah, some of my favorite pens. And you can just come back through and add tiny little dots in. We're gonna add in a little moon. We'll make this guy a moon. Make him a, is that a crescent moon? Yeah, super fun. Cool. Yeah, that's looking cool. Love it. Come back through, bring some of those stars into your horizon. Now we're gonna maybe put some white on the bottom of these clouds just to outline them a little bit. Just on the outsides, very sparing with it, not a ton. Cool, and then we're gonna take our pen, not that one, the brush pen is the bad one. We're gonna come through and add some birds, because why not? I think there's birds in almost every one of my photos. You can really put these wherever. Don't want to add too many though. Cool. And too uniform either. You don't want them to be uniform. And I think that's gonna wrap it up for this video. So let's do my favorite part, is to take off the tape. This is the completion part. I didn't get my tape all the way down, so make sure you press your tape all the way down to your paper, else you get some bleeding parts, which can be kind of cool. It's definitely characteristic of watercolor, you know. And there you have it. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Please like and subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much.